Hey everybody, I'm Tyler.
And hey, I'm Brian.
And today we wanted to talk a little bit more about a big mistake that people make when they receive new cables and connectivity. And that's just thinking that this is a brand new cable assembly. I'm sure it's perfectly fine. I don't need to inspect it. I don't need to clean it or check it. And that ends up being a catastrophic problem for them.
Yep.
You oftentimes hear people talk about dust caps and never assume it's clean. And I can't stress enough that no matter what even the manufacturers try to do, it can leave their facility perfectly fine. But I can't stress enough that just because that worked doesn't mean that by the time the end user received it, that it's clean.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Tyler, there's a number of things that can happen, right? So a factory can go through, have a wonderful process, do the testing, and everything looks pristine. But sometimes what happens is when they start putting these end caps on, the protective end caps, you have things like they'll have like plasticizers, and basically what that is, that's can cause some oil residue, and these are kind of some mold release when they actually go through and mold these, right? So you can sometimes have that get on there. Another thing that I've seen happen is you start to see dust get on there, and maybe some of that's connector wear debris that's coming on, or sometimes too, everything has gone through tested, and depending on how the end caps are being stored at the production facility, sometimes a little bit small amounts of dust, but as it gets on to the inside of the end cap and things shake and vibrate in the shipping process, it can actually get onto the ferrule end face.
You were talking about that mold example. I saw that firsthand a couple of years ago. I was working with some folks at an industry event, and there's a cabling manufacturer that was giving demonstrations of their connector, and they were showing that, hey, I could terminate this connector in the field, and I can plug it in, and everything is great. And I said, you're not checking that before you actually made it. And he said, hey, this was checked at the factory. Everything was great and wonderful. And I said, let's take a look at that just for example. This brand new connector right out of the bag, I removed the dust cap and we checked it with a microscope, and it had mold all over it, residue all over it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And connector after connector, we kept on opening. He said, no, that must be a problem, just a rare occurrence. No, connector after connector, this was happening over and over. And he was paranoid started thinking about the problems of his facility. I said, no, it's not. It probably left your facility perfectly fine.
Sure.
And, who knows where it was stored. Maybe it was in a warehouse in New Orleans or whatnot. But the different environmental factors that impacted this ultimately led to, by the time the end user got it, there was this mold residue that was on the end of it. Now, the good news is all he had to do once he checked that was clean it.
Yep.
And it came right off.
Right.
So it goes back to that proactive inspection thing again. But basically, once he did that, it was a big relief. And I said, it's not your fault. This is something that's just the nature of physics, that this is going to happen. And so, but this is just an assumption. You think about copper guys. Right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of copper guys are used to being able to take the patch cord outside of the bag and then plug it up. And if they have an issue, they'll come back and say, hey, look, we got to replace this patch cord.
Yeah, a reactive mentality.
Yes. Yeah, it's a reactive mentality. But realistically, what's happening in the industry is you have a lot of guys that are pretty new to fiber. And so I think what they're doing, they have sometimes an unrealistic expectation. And it's not necessarily that once in a while, if you have a cable assembly or even a piece of equipment that has a little bit of dust on there, that the manufacturer is bad or that he's actually having quality problems. Far from it. I mean, dust and residue type contamination are things that just actually happen. But the great thing is it's a very easy problem to solve. And once you're aware of it, it's very easy to do the clean and inspect process to make sure that you remove it, right? So the whole thing is when you open up the bag and you're pulling your jumper out or your drop cable, or even if you're sitting there plugging something into your piece of, network gear, you want to make sure that you inspect it and clean it. And again, dust happens, residues happen. It's just a fact of life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'd like to hear from you. If there's if you ever had an experience where you check a cable right from the manufacturer, again, no fault of the manufacturer, but what's the most crazy thing that you've ever seen by inspecting a connector right out of the bag? Until next time, I'm Tyler.
Hey, and I'm Brian.